Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you may be joining us. It's been a little while since I last made a video here on Genesis. The end of the year was extremely hectic for me and here at the church and such. I'm sure you all will understand that, right? If you've got family and friends and all that fun jazz and such. So I'm happy to be back. I'm glad we can jump back into it. Just as a quick recap for our last one, I'd encourage you to go to watch, whether you're on Facebook. The easiest place is YouTube because there's a playlist with all of them right there, and so you don't have to scroll to find them and stuff like that. We left off at the end of chapter 12 with Abraham having learned a very valuable lesson. Or excuse me, he's still Abram. He's not Abraham yet. He's still Abram, right? He and Sarai and Lot and the rest of the family, right? They go to Egypt to escape the plague, or that's not really a plague. It's a famine. Um, and they lie to the Pharaoh, and it causes them to lose testimony and all that kind of stuff. And they learn the valuable lesson that disobedience and lies, disobeying God, right? In short, it has harsh consequences when we disobey God. It's almost like he's God, king of the universe, who sets the moral law and all that kind of stuff, and to go against him is bad, right? So that's where we pick up here in chapter 13, which is where we're going to be today. And we're going to see that the consequences of Abram's choices continue to haunt him for a little bit of time here, right? So we're in chapter 13. If you want to join us, if you want to read it, of course, I read it out loud, but if you want to read along, Genesis chapter 13, starting in verse 1. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all he had, and Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, and silver, and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar, which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. If thou wilt depart to the right hand, I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes, and behold, and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves from one another. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent towards Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. We're going to stop there with verse 13, and let's talk about what's happened here, right? So they travel from Egypt, and it says to the south, even though they come up from Egypt, right? Because Egypt is down here, and the south of the land of Canaan is still north of Egypt, right? And so they leave Egypt, go up to the south, right? To a place that Abram, if you remember back a few chapters ago, had already built an altar once. And this probably, or at least possibly, was really the last place that Abram may have felt this close relationship with God and wanted to return there to seek reconciliation. And it's not a bad thing if we have areas or places we go to where we feel close to God, as long as we recognize that it is God, not the place. That matters, right? I know somebody who, when he gets up in the morning, early morning, he loves trains. And when he does his devotions and spends that time with God, he drives down to the train tracks and just sits there. And sometimes he sees a train, sometimes he doesn't. I personally enjoy hiking, right? Things like that. Whatever it is for you, that is okay, to go to a place where it feels easier sometimes to seek God. As long as we recognize that it is God that we are seeking, not a place, right? God that we're seeking, not a place. And so Lot and Abram and Sarai and all of their cattle, all of their herds, all of their servants, everything, they all go with each other. And we see in verses 5 through 11 that Lot and his family are now going to be seeking their own self interests um, over the interests of the good of the collective, right? And most likely, this strife wasn't just between their servants, their herdsmen, but between Abram and Lot as well, right? Lot had looked up to Abram for many a year, right? Abram had kind of taken Lot. Lot is a significant amount younger than Abram. And Abram had taken Lot under his wing and helped raise him and stuff like that. And then he watches as Abram falls in this whole thing with Egypt. And I don't think it's a stretch nor hard to go. Lot loses a lot of respect for Abram in this moment, and Lot is now a grown man with a family and all that kind of stuff, right? It's not like he's a 16-year-old watching his dad, right? And so, most likely, the strife that comes up is not simply between the herdsmen, but between Abram and Lot as well. And sadly, just as Abram had left a very bad testimony in Egypt, the infighting would have left a bad testimony on the Canaanites around them, right? Remember that Abram, while Christianity and Judaism do not exist yet, worship of the one true God does. It just doesn't have those names yet. And Abram is the bearer of the worship of Yahweh. Well, he hasn't named himself Yahweh yet, but of Yahweh, right? The one true God. And the Canaanites that are around them, it mentions the Perizzites and others, right? They are pagans. They worship multiple gods. And so they are watching because Abram has said, no, we worship the one true God. And this is what he stands for and stuff like that. And just as today, people are watching Christians to go, well, are they any different? The secular people there would have been watching Abram, and he's already made mistakes in Egypt, and he doesn't want to make the same ones here. This needs to be a warning to all of us, both to be a good testimony, but also that material possessions, especially those acquired by worldly methods, lead often lead to such problems. I'm not saying that you need to be poor, right, and destitute and stuff like that. Not at all. What I am saying, though, is that when our focus is on worldly possessions, whether it's money, whether it's house, cars, right, whatever, it oftentimes leads to problems. When our focus is on God, sometimes we're blessed with those things, sometimes we're not, but it doesn't lead to those problems that Abram is facing. Under these circumstances that have occurred between Lot and Abram, sometimes the best thing two believers can do is to separate. Now, I want to make this clear. I'm not talking about divorce, right? This isn't marriage. I'm talking about you are just two believers, right? Maybe you're of the same gender, maybe you're not, but you're just two believers. And things are becoming extremely untenable. And sometimes the best thing you can do is just to separate from each other. To go, okay, you know what? Whether because of our differences, because of our inability to follow after what God has said, right? Our inability that to live, as Romans says, so much as it's up to us to live at peace, right? Those sorts of things. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just to separate. It should not be the first idea. We should always seek reconciliation. We should always be seeking to grow together. But sometimes the best thing to do is to remove the cog, to walk away, right? Separate it out. And that is the solution proposed by Abram. There's a ton of open land in Canaan. Remember that this time they are more nomadic in their lifestyle, right? So there's a ton of open land. And so there's no need to fight over it. There's no need to fight, right? Likewise, there is plenty of work to do for the kingdom of God, for there to be multiple different groups of people and believers, right? There's plenty of work that must be done in the kingdom. And so if you say, listen, we disagree on the method, our message remains the same, right? Our message is to reach the lost. But man, we've just got differences in method. We've got differences in personality, differences in so many things that we cannot overcome. There is plenty of work still to be done. So my group's going to go here and your group's going to go there. And we're going to do the work of God separately, praying for one another, praying that God uses the other one mightily. But we're not going to work together like that anymore as one group. We're going to split into two groups. Sometimes that's the best thing to do. It is never the first thing that you should do. You should always seek reconciliation, always seek to grow together. But when the time comes, that's sometimes what has to happen. And Abram has now learned the valuable lesson that God's going to take care of him. And so he lets Lot take the pick, right? Lot, you choose where you want to go. I trust God's going to take care of me. You choose where you want to go. And the interesting thing is that Abram is the older one, and he's the leader of the group. And so he had the right to pick first. He had the right to go, listen, I'm the leader, I'm the older one. I'm going to choose where I want to go, and then you go somewhere else. But instead, he graciously says, no, no, Lot, you choose. You choose. We're seeing here that Abram is a good leader. He's made a mistake, but he's a good leader. And here we see a bit of Lot's heart, because Lot should have been very thankful, yet deferred to Abram. He should have said, Abram, I'm so thankful for you and for willing to let me do this. But you know what? You are the leader. You are the older one. You choose. Instead, Lot seizes the opportunity for himself. He sees his opportunity and he goes, well, I better take it. And we see a heart in Lot here that you may go, well, Pastor, just from these verses, I don't think we see much. And you're right. But when taken in the context of everything else we're going to read about Lot, we're going to see that Lot has a number of issues. And I apologize for the sun that's coming through this. See, I can just block it with my hand right there. Through the window right there. I'm doing my best to kind of stay out of it. I'm not good at this stuff, so if somebody wants to come into the church and help me out, then you can do that. No. So Lot looks out the plain of the Jordan River, which flows into the Salt Sea, and at that time had 5 prosperous cities in it. Okay, in this region now is unbearably hot and almost desolate, but then it was as green as the garden of the Lord, right? With the temperature being significantly less due to the lingering effects of the ice age in the north, right? I've heard a lot of Christians try to deny the idea of an ice age. An ice age happened. Whether the entire Earth was covered or the bulk of it, right? We're not entirely sure. I'm by no means a scientist. I'm not going to go into it trying to defend or not defend or what have you. If I turn that like that, that's a little bit better. But an ice age happened. Remember, we talked about that before. And so the earth itself is not as warm yet as it is today. As a Christian, you'll never hear me deny climate change. Climate change is a real thing. We can talk about reasons and things like that, but we know the earth changes its climate, goes in a cycle. And that time it was not in its hot cycle. Right now we are. And so there's this prosperous valley, and Lot went east into that plain, and Abram went west back into the hill country of Canaan. Now, Lot, maybe because he was still hesitant to live in a city that was so obviously wicked, doesn't immediately go live in Sodom. We know that he will eventually, right? In the next couple chapters, we'll read about that. But he's going to attempt to live as close to it as he can to enjoy the advantages of the city, but far enough away to not actually be a part of its life. And Christians, we try to do that today. And I'm not talking about cities here, right? I'm talking about we try to walk this line too, get as close to sin as we possibly can without actually going over that line. And we fail miserably at it, just like Lot is going to do. The best thing to do is to go away. Don't be near the sin. Don't follow that line at all. Right? We like to ask ourselves, well, how close can I get before it's sin? Don't ask yourself that question. Instead, ask yourself, how far away from this can I get? Right? To say, well, I still want to get close to sin is to say, I don't love God very much. Right? That's frankly what we're saying. We're going to stop there for today. As a quick recap, we looked at a few major ideas, right? That Christians, it's okay in the end, sometimes if it's impossible to fix the situation, to separate. As long as you're both still working towards the kingdom of God, still praying for each other and things like that, right? We looked at the beginnings of some of the seeds of Lot's heart that we're going to see as we continue on down through this. And we look to also see Abram's heart and where he is at. And though he has made these mistakes, he is still an incredible man that God's going to use. Next week, we'll continue looking at chapter 13 here. We're going to start in verse 14 next week. I'm glad to be back with you guys. As always, if you have questions, comments, things like that, comment them below. Like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. In my hope and prayer sincerely that as we pick this back up, if you haven't watched any of the previous ones, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that. There's a whole study on Revelation as well. Let's learn the Bible together and grow closer to God together. So God bless, guys. Have a great week. I will see you all Sunday morning 9:30. If you want to come to church, if not, I'll see you in our next video. Thanks and God bless, guys.